Coming up on this episode of the Hockey Nuts, Steve and I get you caught up with all the news of the past week around the hockey world. The NHL playoffs are wrapping up round 1 and heading into round 2. Steve and I will get you caught up with everything that's happened in each series. Plus, we'll also preview round 2 of the NHL playoffs. We'll have the details of all this, plus the Minor League Hockey Minute, the NCAA Hockey Minute, and our picks of the week coming up next. This is the Hockey Nuts Podcast, Season 2, Episode 34, recorded on Wednesday, April 25th, 2018. NHL Playoffs, Round 1 Wrap-Up, and Round 2 Preview.
Shut up and sit down.
To the boards, to the corner. Schmidt will try and hold it there. And that's going to do it. As the horn sounds, and the Knights have ousted the Kings. And their historic first ever playoff series victory is a clean sweep.
The Jets with a dominating performance, 5-0 winners, and they will soar into the second round, riding a jet stream of confidence.
Tampa Bay will join the Vegas Golden Knights, the San Jose Sharks, and the Winnipeg Jets in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. They win it by a score of 3-1 and take the series in 5.
Fans on their feet, cheering on their Colorado Avalanche. The Nashville Predators will advance to a second-round matchup with the Winnipeg Jets. Pecorine with his 4th career playoff shutout. Predators win it. 5-0, win the series, 4-2.
The heart of a champion on display here this afternoon as the Pittsburgh Penguins have won 9 consecutive playoff series. They open up this title defense in round number 1 with a 6-game victory over the Philadelphia Flyers. The Washington Capitals will surround Braden Holtby as they have won this series in 6 games over the Columbus Blue Jackets, and they advance to the second round and another date with the defending back-to-back Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins.
Be the Boston Bruins and the Tampa Bay Lightning. A 7th-game win at home by Boston. Final score 7-4 Bruins.
Welcome to episode 34 of season 2 of the Hockey Nuts Podcast. My name is Wayne Halley. I'm here with Steve Ball. How's it going tonight, Steve?
It's going good, Wayne. Good to be with you tonight, talk hockey, and I'm telling you, we got some exciting stuff to talk about this week with the playoffs really ramped up, especially tonight with your Bruins and the Maple Leafs finishing off the first round of the playoffs. I'm very pumped for that game.
Yeah, we're recording this a couple of hours before that game, so as of the recording of this game, neither one of us have any clue who's going to win the game, but it's pretty obvious who I'm cheering for, but but yeah, we've got that game, so I'm a little wound up for that game coming up tonight in Boston, and but we've got a lot of other stuff to talk about. It's been 6 days since we last did a podcast. We did one last Thursday, and of course this is Wednesday, so we're doing a little bit one day earlier than last week. And we've got quite a bit to talk about. We've got a couple of guarantees to talk about from different people around the league. We've got on the ice, it's been relatively slow as far as number of games are concerned.
Right.
It's been just 12 games since we last did a podcast, but 10 of those games were elimination games to one team or another.
Right.
12 games, but they were all huge games. So we've got to get everybody caught up on all of that. And we've got a little bit of KHL. We've got a little bit of American Hockey League to talk about. So let's get started. Oh, and we got the World Under-18s going on too. So we'll be talking about that as well. The Hockey Nuts podcast can be found on major podcast search engines like Apple Podcasts and Google Play Music. Just search for the term The Hockey Nuts in whatever app you use to get podcasts. We can also be found at thehockeywriters.com on their podcast page. TheHockeyWriters.com is a great place to get more stories and content about our favorite sport. We love listener involvement, and there are a few ways you can get involved with the show. You can email the show at feedback@thehockeynuts.com, or you can leave us a voicemail in our mailbox at 919-960-1718. You can also tweet us. I'm at Wayne Halley 9. Steve is at sball504man. Also, be sure to visit our website at thehockeynuts.com. There you can see all of our past episodes archived, and you can listen to the show through your web browser on that site. As always, links and stories that we mention in the show are available in the show notes for this episode. In addition to our website, you can also watch us record the show each week live on YouTube. We generally record on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday nights, depending on our work schedules. You can find our YouTube channel at thehockeynuts.com/YouTube. The show is a hobby and a labor of love for us, but the production of it is not free. To help us offset the cost of producing the show, we've set up various affiliate links on our webpage at thehockeynuts.com. The affiliate links allow you to help financially support our podcast without costing you any more money out of pocket. Some of the affiliate relationships we have are with Amazon, hockeymonkey.com, Ting.com. If you use any of these services, we'd greatly appreciate it if you use our affiliate links to those sites. Simply go to thehockeynuts.com and click on the appropriate advertising banner on the right. Your purchase will not cost you anything extra, and a small portion of your purchase will come back to help support the show. And we thank you very much. Now, back to the show. So we're going to start with the Stanley Cup playoffs, though, of course, and we'll go down like we did last week. We'll go down series by series and wrap up all the ones that are already finished, and then we'll be talking about the ones or the one that is still left unfinished in the first round. Basically, right now, we've got two teams still playing in Boston and Toronto, and everybody else is basically just sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting for this series to get done so they can get the second round underway.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, so let's start with, in the East, we'll go with the Lightning and Devils. And that series is all wrapped up, of course. Going back to Game 1, Tampa won that one. Game 2, Tampa won that one. We talked about those last week. Game 3, New Jersey won that one. Game 4, Tampa won that one. I believe we even talked about that one last week.
We did.
So the only game that has been played in that series since we last recorded was Game 5. And Tampa Bay ended up winning that one 3-1, finishing off the Devils. So Tampa moves on, not surprisingly in my mind anyway. That Tampa moves on, and nice learning experience for the Devils in this one.
Yes, they got really. They drew the team that's playing the best throughout the season in the Eastern Conference in the Tampa Bay Lightning, but I really never felt they were really never a threat. And I'm biased, of course, so you might not want to listen to what I say. But they just never. It was easily the most boring of the playoff series in the East, and I really never thought that New Jersey ever really got it going very much. They had one win, and I really think they were lucky to get that win too. But I hope they take it as a. I mean, they were there, and they qualified for the playoffs. And I guess they should be happy that they did. So and that's, I think that's all I can really say about it, because they really didn't muster much of a push against Tampa Bay in this series.
No, they ended up going down in 5, and every game ended up they were all in regulation. They were all 2 goals or more. So they hung with them for a little bit, but they just couldn't score goals in this series. They only ended up with 5, 6, 7, 12 goals total in the 5 games, which is I've seen worse, but it's certainly
Right.
not great, and it's certainly not enough to win you a series. So basically what Tampa Bay ended up doing is they focused on shutting down Taylor Hall, and they did a pretty good job at that. And they they won that one going away, I guess, is about the best way to do it. Talk about that one. So Tampa moves on in that series. Taylor Hall ended up with 6 points in the 5 games. So decent, but for a team that relied on him to do the bulk of their scoring, he only scored 2 goals the whole series.
Yeah.
So Tampa Bay moves on, and I don't know if there's a whole lot else to talk about that one. There's only been 1 game since that last series, so let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is the one series that is still going on in this whole playoff. That's the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yep.
And that one is headed to a Game 7. So, of course, first 2 games went to Boston. Game 3 went to Toronto. Game 4 went to Boston. So Boston split the 2 games in Toronto, taking the commanding 3-1 lead. But since that game, this series has been all Toronto for the most part.
Right.
But I also say that at the same time, Boston could have won either Game 5 or 6. Clearly, the best player for Toronto in Games 5 and 6 have been Anderson, the goaltender.
Yep.
He stole the show both nights, and one of those games was in Boston, one of those games was in Toronto, and unfortunately they had the terrorist attack there in Toronto right before Game 6 happened, which kind of put a little bit of a damper on the beginning of this game, but once the game got going, everybody in the crowd pretty much forgot about all that, and they were right back in their regular form. You had the big crowd inside the building, the big crowd outside the building. The crowd outside the building, every time they'd show camera shots of the crowd going nuts when Toronto would score, it gets under your skin a little bit if you're a Boston fan.
That. Yeah, they're this team Toronto is headed up. Contrary to the Devils, who you really don't know. Will they show up again next year and make the playoffs? We'll see. We'll see what happens. But in the case of Toronto, I'm expecting them to make the playoffs. I'm expecting them maybe to win a round or maybe 2. Toronto definitely is a team of the future. And I think we talked about it when I was surprised they lost Game 4. To be honest with you, that was a great win by Boston to win Game 4. And really, they played very, very well in that game. They were in control of that game and deserved to win. But let's suffice to say they got back into Game 6 in Boston, and it's just I've watched Toronto play against most people, and we talked about this before we started the podcast tonight. Toronto gets the calls at home. They get the officials usually call a game, and it may be even called well, but Toronto fares well with officiating when they're playing at home. They really do. They get breaks and win games that when it comes right down to it, if it's 1 or 2 big plays in a game that an official misses a call or makes a very close call or a razor sharp decision on some sort of a play, it usually goes in Toronto's favor, and they take full advantage of that.
Yep.
So it's hard to win there.
Yeah,
and
it was.
You got the fans too.
Yeah, and Toronto on the I was on social media a lot during Game 5, and I wasn't really participating so much in the discussion as I just had it up and I saw, the tweets scrolling down through, and there were a ton of Toronto fans complaining about the officiating in Game 5, the game that was in Boston, right. Because, Boston was given several more power plays than Toronto was. But when I'm watching the game, I didn't think that Boston was, they were getting more power plays than Toronto, but every call that was made, to me, was an obvious call. It wasn't anything that the officials missed.
Right.
In any way. But in Game 6, I didn't feel the same way. There was 2 plays in particular that really got under my skin. One was that play along the boards where McAvoy reached in to get the puck away from Kadri, and Kadri went down like he got shot. And, whether you're a fan of the Bruins or the Toronto Maple Leafs, if you're a reasonable fan, it's easy to see that Kadri just took a dive there. And the officials bought it, and the Bruins ended up shorthanded on that situation. Fortunately, Maple Leafs didn't score. The first part of that power play was a 4-on-3 because there was a matching minor earlier in that. There was the Backes elbow to Anderson, which I say, okay, fine, that's an okay call because Backes did in fact elbow Anderson, but the whole play, if you watch it, is the Toronto defenseman was backing Backes up towards the goalie. He was pushing him back towards the goalie, and Backes, it was no intent whatsoever to elbow him on purpose. Yes, he elbowed him, but it wasn't on purpose. He was actually trying to make a play at the puck, and when he went to move his stick toward the puck, that's when the elbow came back and hit Anderson in the face. Mm-hmm. So Anderson goes down like he got shot. And then Backes gets attacked by the defenseman, so the referees decide to even up the call on that one, much to Toronto's dismay. But Backes, was standing there. He didn't even know what he did to Anderson at first when he turned around and saw him laying on the ice. And then all of a sudden he gets attacked by the Toronto defenseman. So they evened it up, and then right after that was the Kadri dive, which to me just looked like a makeup call is what it was. They basically, the officials felt that probably Toronto should be on a power play, and they found a way to do it. Kadri dives, and they make the call, which I think is complete BS. And then the other one that really got under my skin was, it could have been a factor in the game. We don't know. About 30, 40 seconds left in the game. Toronto, Bruins had pulled their goalie, and Toronto player gets the puck, and just as he gets the puck to skate away from Backes, Patrick Marleau throws a big league pick on Backes and basically steps right into his path to deliberately block him from getting access to the player with the puck. And then that player ends up, I think it was, who was it? It was Plekanec or Marner. I can't remember who it was that had the puck on the empty net.
In Game 6?
Yeah.
I believe it was Tomas Plekanec.
Well, Plekanec ended up scoring, but I'm not sure if he's the one that had the puck initially and then ended up... basically, it was Backes getting picked by Marleau, and the player with the puck ends up, going down and setting up a goal or scoring an empty net goal. Anyway, it cleared the path so that they could get the empty net goal. And I felt there should have been an interference call there because it was 100% textbook clear interference, and they blew that call. So those were the two calls that got under my skin, and to your reference of the calls that that Toronto gets in their home building, that's two right there. And I'm sure Toronto fans will pull up 18 references to calls that Boston got, I'm sure. But
and a lot of those are probably at TD Garden, because I don't see Toronto getting, they just in their building they get the calls. That's just how it is. And so if there's Toronto fans listening to this podcast tonight, I've been watching them play. I've been watching my team play there for years. And that's the way it is. It happens very, very frequently. Yep. And I even said to you, I don't know if the officials are scared walking to their car after the game because of the Toronto fans or what it is. But they get the calls. They get the calls in that building. Yep. And
well, and speaking of officials, tonight's game, it's going to be Wes McCauley and Kelly Sutherland. So two very experienced officials, two officials. I know McCauley has definitely done Stanley Cup final games, and I believe Sutherland has as well. So these are, the NHL tap the shoulders of two very experienced officials. So I expect the game to be called fairly tonight. Whoever ends up winning, I just want the game to be called straight up fair. Let these dives go or penalize these divers for doing it on both sides. If Marchand takes a dive, he should be penalized too.
Right.
I hate seeing that stuff in the game. I don't want to see hockey turn into soccer. Soccer is rampant with diving. It's ridiculous how much players in soccer dive all over, all around the world. I don't want to see hockey stoop to those levels. And unfortunately, there's a few players around the league that do it. Kadri's one of them. Marchand, of course, is one of them. I want to see either the officials either don't let those go, don't call them at all, or call them out on it. And usually when they call the embellishment penalty, they're taking both and turning it into a 4-on-4. So So that's what I want to see. Whether we'll see that or not, we'll know. Who knows? So, all right. Enough about that series. So that one is still yet to be concluded. Game 7's tonight at 7:30 Eastern. Of course, NBC Sports is going to have that game. So let's move on to the next series, which is already concluded. Of course, the rest of these series we'll be talking about are all over. Mm-hmm. The next one in the East is kind of surprising to me anyway. Washington, Columbus.
Right.
Columbus jumps out to a 2-0 lead at Washington in that series, 2 overtime games. And then the Capitals had scored an overtime winner of their own in Game 3 to cut the series to 2-1. That's where we left off last week. Since then, Washington has basically gone on a run. They beat Columbus 4-1 in Game 4. That was last Thursday. In Game 5, they beat Columbus again in overtime, 4-3. And then in Game 6, Washington just blew away Columbus, 6-3 in Columbus.
Yep.
So that was a game where basically, I watched bits and pieces of it. The Bruins were playing at the same time, so I wasn't watching, both completely. I was focused on Boston's game, but keeping an eye on Washington's game at the same time. And it just looked like Washington just went in there and said, "Look, we're done with this team. Let's get this done and move on."
Yeah,
and that's exactly what they did.
They really dismantled them in Game 6. The game of games in that series was Game 5. And Columbus had them. Columbus had them beat. They outplayed them entirely in the third period. Outshot them 16-1. Had the game won. And Braden Holtby just really was the player of that game. Even though he gave up 3 goals, he was the player of that game because of the third period. He played out of his mind. And then in the overtime, he played very well. And that was the game. If there was going to be a game to turn the tide, that was the game. Columbus had it. The game was in Washington. They had it, and they could have really put Washington in a really big hole, and they blew it. They lost that game. They could not overcome Braden Holtby, and I'm sure he got a lot of confidence from that game. But that game in and of itself, and I, we're going to talk more about this game and things later on in the podcast, but that really was the backbreaker for Columbus.
Yep.
I really thought that Columbus would have come out and given a more spirited game in Game 6, but after the outcome of that game and during that game, you could really see that Washington had the momentum, and they never gave it up.
Yep.
They had the momentum in that game starting out, and Washington, I got to tell you, that is a strength of that team. When they are on their game and they get the momentum, it's very hard to break them off of that and get the momentum back yourself as a team. Washington can ride that momentum, whether they're scoring or not. They have the upper hand in the neutral zone. They're a very good forechecking team, so they can get you off your game, make you commit turnovers. And whether they're scoring on you or not, you're watching the game and you're going, man, Washington is really controlling this game. They know how to keep the momentum in their favor. And that's what happened in Game 6. And I think Columbus is back. So once they saw that they just couldn't break Washington, I really think it was a mental thing from that point forward. Washington had the game, and they closed it out.
Yep. And that's essentially what they do. So they they advance on, and we're setting up and we'll get to the Pittsburgh series in a second, but we're setting up yet another Washington-Pittsburgh series.
Yeah.
But this whole series begs the question, too, with Columbus, is Sergei Bobrovsky a playoff goaltender?
Well,
because it seems now...
he certainly was in Game 5.
Yeah.
He certainly was in that game. He played very, very well in Game 5. And, of course, they had the 2 overtime wins in Washington. I would have to say he was player of the game in both of those games. But he in Game 5, his team didn't pull through against Braden Holtby. More so than what I've seen from him in the past. I would have to say that Sergei Bobrovsky had a good playoff series. Now
he just couldn't
was it enough?
Yeah.
It wasn't.
That's the ultimate question there. Was it enough?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. I mean, Columbus completely outplayed Washington in Game 5, but Washington pulls away with the win, and that generally can demoralize a team when they play so well enough to win, and then ultimately they just fall flat and end up losing the game. They just came out for Game 6, and it was almost like they were already mentally beaten in Game 6 before the game even started.
Yep. Contrary to the New Jersey Devils, who basically we can say they qualified for the playoffs as a team, and that's it. And I'm actually glad to say that too, that they really fizzled. But Columbus came to play. They even played better than Philadelphia. I would give Columbus as the losing team in the first round. They may very well be the best losing team in the first round in the East. The only team is whoever loses tonight's game against Boston, Toronto, that would give them a run for their money. But Columbus played very well, and I thought outplayed all of the other teams with the exception of tonight's loser.
Yep. All right. Well, let's talk about Washington's next opponent.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh Penguins and the Philadelphia Flyers. Ultimately, they were, let's talk about the individual games first. Game 1 obviously went to Pittsburgh. Game 2, Philly tied it up 5-1. Game 3, Pittsburgh takes the 2-1 series lead. Game 4, Pittsburgh takes the 3-1 series lead. That's basically where we left off last podcast. So since then, we've had 2 games. Game 5, Philadelphia put out a real great effort and managed to extend the series to a Game 6. And that was a 4-2 win in Pittsburgh in that one. Game 6 was back in Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh basically did the same thing that Washington did to Columbus. They came out and decided that they're done with this series, and they're just going to finish off Philadelphia pretty much at will.
Yeah, Philadelphia made some costly mistakes, too, in the third period.
Yep, so they come out and win that game 8-5.
Yep. Pittsburgh, they had their games where they were dominant. Game 1, Game 3, Game 4. But I wouldn't say they were dominant in Game 6. They just, Philadelphia had to win.
Yep.
Philadelphia's backs were against the wall, and they had to play the perfect game. Now, I'm surprised. I'm really surprised how poorly Philadelphia played at home.
Yeah. Well, they had a 4-2 lead at one point in that Game 6. So,
yep.
But then Jake Gensel happened.
Yep.
He ends up scoring 4 goals in the late in the second and in the third period to basically put that game away for Pittsburgh.
They just played like the Stanley Cup champions. And as you know, when you play Pittsburgh, and I hearken back to the Chicago Blackhawks. And their Stanley Cup years, it's very mental. Pittsburgh can break you mentally. It's really a clash of wills. If you're going to win against Pittsburgh in the playoffs, and we didn't make the playoffs this year, but we beat Pittsburgh twice during their Stanley Cup years.
Yep.
In the playoffs, you have to be on top of your game mentally. You have to have timely plays, timely goaltending. And when the opportunities come for you to score, you got to score. And when you do, when you're on your game and you do that against Pittsburgh, you can break them.
Yep.
You can break them mentally. But that's hard to do. That's what you have to do. Philadelphia had the chances to do that in Game 6. They played really well in Game 5. I watched that game. They played super in Game 5. But Game 6, they had the chances and the opportunities, and they blew it. They made mistakes that cost them in that series. I'm thinking back to the power. They had several power play chances in the third period and couldn't convert. So that's the type of thing that you got to do against that team.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, what really was the backbreaker for Philadelphia was Pittsburgh's that didn't help either. But Pittsburgh's fourth goal was scored at the 19:06 mark of the second period. Teams talk all the time about giving up goals in the last 2 minutes of any period and the first 2 minutes of any period. They've put a focus on making sure that they don't give up a goal because those late and early period goals are momentum changers. Well, they essentially became the victim of 2 of them. Gensel got his first goal at 19:06 of the second, so 54 minutes seconds left in the second period when Gensel gets that goal. And then they come right back out into the third, and 30 seconds into the third, another goal for Pittsburgh.
Yep.
Those two goals right there are just
unlike Washington. When Pittsburgh gets, this is my opinion. It's my opinion. You might disagree with me. When Pittsburgh gets the momentum, they don't keep it as long, but they're deadly. When they get the momentum, they can score goals in bunches. And you got to stop that. You got to stop that momentum as soon as you possibly can. Whether it's get into a fight, whether it's it might be icing the puck. It might be whatever you got to do to divert the momentum and divert Pittsburgh's attention and focus when they get the momentum. They get amped up.
Yep.
And you got to stop that. You got to stop it somehow. And
But yeah, ultimately, what killed Philadelphia is their goaltending.
Yep.
The Philadelphia for years and years and years have had a trouble finding a clear-cut, undisputed number one goalie. I mean, you could even make a case that it goes back to Ron Hextall since the last time that they had a guy that everybody knows is their number one.
Right.
Philadelphia hasn't had that in a long, long time. They got a couple of nice prospects coming up through, but they're still a couple of years away. And this is a team that had Bobrovsky at one time.
Yeah.
They let him go. So
they let him go.
The other thing that really killed Philadelphia was the injuries. And Sean Couturier to go out there and score a hat trick in game 6 with what ultimately they announced it after the game was a torn MCL.
Yeah.
To have him go out there, I mean, that's just amazing to see him, perform despite having that injury.
Right.
And he'll have to go get that repaired. But yeah, the injuries that Philadelphia suffered, not only to Couturier, but their goaltenders were getting hurt, and just a number of bumps and bruises that all the players had. And we'll talk about those injuries when we get to our injury segment, but yeah, that was a killer there. And then of course, Pittsburgh being Pittsburgh, it's they're a team that is a team right there, Pittsburgh. And I don't know if there's maybe one, maybe two, maybe three other teams around the league where going into the season, the goal for Pittsburgh is to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
And the season is essentially a failure if they don't.
Right.
I don't know how many teams can honestly say that is the case.
Right.
I know Boston can't.
They follow up on it very well. I agree. And Wayne, we're going to talk about this probably at the end of the show too. But this time for Barry Trotz and the Washington Capitals, I think it's the last hurrah. They have got to come in. Now, there's no excuse. They have no excuse. They can't, even injuries, they cannot throw an excuse up this time.
Yep.
They have to come into that series knowing how to play that team, knowing what to expect, and play like the Washington Capitals, who won the division, the best team in the Metropolitan Division for the season. And if they don't win this series, I don't know why Barry Trotz stays in Washington. I really don't. He can't beat them if they don't win.
Yep.
I mean, this is the series. They got to win this series.
Yeah, and let's talk about that series a little bit. Might as well preview the next round in the Eastern Conference before we get going. But to the West, Capitals and the Penguins have met each other. This will be the 11th time in the team's history that they've played each other in the playoffs at one point or another. Mm-hmm. Pittsburgh is 9-1 against them, lifetime. They're 3-0 against Washington in playoff series in the Ovechkin/Crosby era, since those two players have been around.
Yep.
Pittsburgh's never lost to Washington. And here we are playing them again, and I know all Washington fans. In fact, I personally know one. I work with a guy at the store I work at who is from the D.C. area, and he's a Washington, of course, Washington across the board fan. And when he found out that the Penguins were going to be the team that the Washington Capitals are going to face, he's like, "Oh God, here we go again."
Yeah.
So much for this one. It was nice while it lasted.
You got to have confidence in your team at this point. Washington has a very powerful offensive team. They really do.
Yep.
And when Braden Holtby's on his game, I can't think of a better goalie in the NHL. He's definitely in the top three. But it's strange. Stranger things have happened. I see that Evgeny Malkin is not even going to be playing in Game 1.
Yep.
So there's some injury situations with Pittsburgh. If I'm Washington, I'm exploiting. I'm going all out against Sidney Crosby. I am doing. And the Rangers we're not in the playoffs this year, but we were damn effective at shutting that guy down in the playoffs. You can do it, but you got to focus on it. That's got to be maybe your number one priority. Shut down Sidney Crosby.
Yep.
If you do that, you force Pittsburgh to have to use their second and third line guys to beat you. And sometimes they can, but Washington should know what's coming, Force Phil Kessel to be the guy to score and win the games.
Yeah.
Force him to, I think that Washington has another golden opportunity. Barry Trotz has seized another golden opportunity, and they got to win this time for his coaching future. They got to win.
They pretty much do, and I think that's ultimately what they're waiting for. They said earlier in this series that they're going to hold serve on Trotz and to decide his fate after the season, or after once Washington's season finished, whenever that may be.
Yeah. And kudos to Washington, Wayne. They really came back strong. It is very hard to beat a team 4 times in a row in the playoffs.
Yep.
Win 4 games in a row again, especially when you're down 2-0.
Yep,
and they did it. They came out there and played like a professional, tough, hard-nosed team, one of the best in the NHL. They proved themselves. So they should have all the confidence in the world going into that series with Pittsburgh. There ought not to be, as I said, I can't see of any excuses they can bring up.
Nope.
It's right there for them this time,
Yep, it sure is. All right, so let's talk about the Tampa Bay series. Obviously, they don't know who they're going to play yet, but do you think either the Bruins or the Maple Leafs have a shot at beating the Lightning? Now, the big question right now, the debate goes on year after year after year, is the old rust versus rest debate. Is it going to be better for Tampa Bay finishing off their series and sitting around for a week before they play the next game, where their next opponent is basically going to finish one series and immediately start the next series?
Yeah.
Which team will be sharper in game one? Will it be Tampa Bay, who's had the opportunity to rest their players, or will it be either Toronto or Boston, who basically they are getting an extra day off? Their first game it's already been announced. Their first game isn't until Saturday in this series. Will it be the team that basically comes off just a couple of days rest?
Right.
There's arguments going both ways. I guess
Right.
We'll find out in that one. Ultimately, I think the Lightning is the better team right now versus either the Bruins or the Maple Leafs. That's just my personal opinion in that one. I hope it doesn't go that way, but
right. Would you say that I don't think Tampa Bay has the home ice advantage at all that, say, a Toronto Maple Leafs squad has? Toronto, they just don't lose a lot. They're a good home team, and they have the crowd. In the case of Boston, if Boston wins tonight, and I think that's a good possibility, Wayne, I think Boston may win tonight, but that's just my gut feeling. In the case of Boston, if they do win tonight, I think they give Tampa Bay a much tougher challenge than a young, at times very error-prone Toronto Maple Leaf squad does. I think Boston is up to the task against Tampa Bay, and it'll be a very good series. And I think it would be if Toronto won too, but I think Boston gives them a better series than Toronto does, in my gut right now.
I would agree, but then again, Boston still has to get by Toronto to make that series happen. So but ultimately, I think Tampa Bay moves on from that series, and ultimately, I think Pittsburgh is going to end up beating Washington once again this year.
Wow,
that's just my personal gut feeling on both those series.
Yeah. I picked Washington to win last year against Pittsburgh. I'm not going to be that foolish again. I don't know who wins that series, though. I really don't. I hate to say I picked Pittsburgh, but I picked them only because of the fact that they have literally owned the Washington Capitals in the playoffs. They just have. And Washington's got to set a precedent for me to change my feelings.
Yep.
I think they will win against the Capitals because the Capitals don't know how to beat them. And I think in the series with Tampa Bay, I think they move on, but I think they stand a much tougher test with the Boston Bruins coming in there.
Yeah, well, let's hope it is the Bruins.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the West. We've talked enough about the East. First series we need to talk about is the Predators versus Avalanche. That game, or that series, ended up going 6. Of course, Nashville won game 1 and 2. Colorado won game 3. Nashville won game 4, taking the 3-1 series lead as of the last podcast. So since then, we've had 2 games. Colorado won Game 5 in a very gutsy effort in Nashville on the road to extend the series to a Game 6. That was a 2-1 game. And then Game 6 was all Nashville, 5-0. Again, Nashville asserting themselves as clearly the better team of the two and showing Colorado that they still have a lot to learn. But overall, a very successful season for the Colorado Avalanche. No one ever expected them to make the playoffs after the season they had last year. And here they are. They make the playoffs and extend the Nashville Predators to 6 games in the first round. Nashville being one of those few teams that can clearly say, or that can believe and say that it's Stanley Cup or bust for them.
Yeah, I agree. I really wasn't surprised. Andrew Hammond, the Hamburglar. What a game he played.
That Game 5,
yeah. I mean, he played like the Andrew Hammond of the Ottawa Senators.
Yep.
He played a great game.
That was an extremely exciting game. Nashville had a 1-0 lead going well into the third period, and then Nathan MacKinnon with that setup that he had to tie the game. What a ridiculous! I mean, the patience that he displayed on that play, where he basically had the puck right in the slot. Stick handling, and then dishing it off to his wide open teammate and for the goal. It was ridiculous. When I saw that, I'm like, oh my God. It was Landeskog, yeah.
Yeah, that was a tremendous play.
Yep.
And Andrew Hammond played lights out in net. But they just didn't show up in when Game 6 went when it went back to Colorado at the Pepsi Center. They just didn't show up to play. They weren't ready for that game. Nashville got the momentum and really never lost it again. They, as you said, they proved who the better team was on the ice.
Yep.
So
certainly. Now, if you look at that, Nashville going 6 with Colorado, do you look at that as Colorado being better than everyone expected, or do you look at Nashville as not playing to their potential for that whole series?
Ooh, and that's a very good point, Wayne.
Yeah.
You want to know my honest opinion?
Yeah.
I think Nashville did not play as well, and give Colorado credit. I just don't think Nashville played very well in that series. They played well in Game 6, but the backbreaker game was Game 4. Colorado could have won that game.
Yep.
Had them.
Yep.
Could have won that game. And that's the game that if Colorado had won that game, I'm telling you, it would have been a hell of a series. It would have been difficult on Nashville. I think it was just a gutsy performance that they won Game 5, and they played very well. I was not impressed, and we're going to talk next about the team that is shining head and shoulders above everybody. In that first round, I mean, you could look at Vegas, but they won 1-0 games. They won these overtime. I think it's the Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg played very well. I didn't put them as the number 1 team in the power rankings. I went strictly by the number of wins. But, Nashville is going to have a hell of a time winning in Winnipeg. And if Winnipeg can pull off a win in Nashville, which after watching this series, I could see them doing it.
Oh, they absolutely.
Yep. Then Nashville's going to have one hell of a time getting by these guys. But we'll see. I mean, Nashville does have experience now.
Yep. So the future's bright for Colorado, just because they've crawled themselves back into a playoff spot, and they've got a bunch of young talent coming up through. That trade, I still say that trade that Sakic made in the with that 3-way trade with the Matt Duchene trade.
Yeah.
That was a huge step forward for Colorado. The pieces they got in that trade are going to go a long way to getting that team back into relevancy. Girard actually was playing in that game or playing in that series, but he got hurt, and then the goaltending injuries that Colorado had ultimately cost them that series. But they'll be back next year, and they'll be a strong team. Next year. So, and speaking of Winnipeg, that is going to be Nashville's next opponent because they beat Minnesota in 5. There's only been 1 game played since we last recorded. Winnipeg had the 3-1 series lead in that one going into our last podcast or coming out of our last podcast. So since then, they've played just Game 5, and that game was all Winnipeg. And pretty much with the exception of Game 3, really, this whole series was all Winnipeg.
Oh, yeah. And I'm telling you, on their home ice, it is deafening. And they have the same crowd that Toronto does out in the parking lot with the Jumbotrons. It is going to be tough on anybody to take down the Winnipeg Jets. They got a great team.
Yep.
And it's gonna be a monumental task for Nashville to beat them.
Yeah, this Nashville Winnipeg, I personally believe that this is the Western Conference Final. It's just happening. Yeah. It's just happening in round 2.
I agree with you because I think either one of those teams, if they win, they're going to beat Vegas. And I don't think San Jose's mess. I could be wrong. San Jose may get by Vegas, I'm jumping ahead here, but I think either one of those guys, Winnipeg or Nashville, they're going to go to the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Winnipeg wins Game 5-0 after basically Minnesota stopped scoring after that 6-2 win in Game 3. They didn't score another goal the rest of the series. They got shut out in Game 4. They got shut out in Game 5. Minnesota's issues, what caused them to lose that series is mostly injuries. Parise got hurt. Suter was hurt. It just all around bumps and bruises with the team. They just didn't play all that well, and it ultimately cost the GM his job. So, and we'll get to that. But just a dominating performance by the Jets and their fans. Their fans are dominating the fan. The fan arena as well. The whiteout that we see in Winnipeg is amazing. And it's good to see. And a lot of people are wondering why the white? Why? Because, Winnipeg wears blue at home and all the fans are wearing white. Well, if you remember going way back, because I don't know when the last time Winnipeg as a franchise won a playoff series. It would probably have to go back to I didn't look it up. I probably should have. It's certainly when the old Jets were there, who are now the Arizona Coyotes. Back in those days, the home team wore white for home games.
Right.
So that is the origin of the whiteout. And of course, there's also the whole, people say, okay, well, Winnipeg is known as the coldest, or one of the coldest cities in the NHL. So the whiteout comes from that as well. But mostly it's because of the fact that when the whole whiteout thing started in Winnipeg, the home team was wearing white. So they would wear white to match the home team colors, and then whatever opponent they were playing would wear darks, and it would show the support that they have for the team. Well, they obviously have decided to keep the whiteout going and use it to their advantage. But it's amazing to see, and you see pictures all over the internet of not only people wearing their white shirts and their white jerseys, but you see some pictures of these fans coming in wearing head to toe white. So they're wearing the white jersey, the white shirt with white pants, white gloves. I've seen people painting their face and hair white.
Yeah.
Amazing.
They're into it, man.
Yep.
And of course, Wayne, they always have been since they've come back in the NHL. They do have the fans. I don't think you're going to see the Winnipeg Jets fall on hard times again.
No, they almost need a bigger arena because they got the smallest arena in the NHL in terms of seating capacity. So kudos to Winnipeg for moving on in the next round. But that Winnipeg Jets Nashville series is going to be it's going to be fun to watch.
Yep, going to be a great series.
All right, let's move on to the Pacific Division now. And the first series we need to talk about there is the Vegas Kings series, which actually was done
last week
when we went in. We talked about the completion of that. So there's not much more to talk about that series since we last recorded because it was over then. Yep. And neither or the Vegas Golden Knights have just been sitting on their thumbs since that series ended. So let's just wrap this one up real quick by just saying, okay, Vegas won that series and San Jose won their series also in a sweep, and that one ended before our last podcast. So let's talk about that series going forward, and that's the Vegas Golden Knights and San Jose Sharks playing each other.
Yes. I feel that, I think Vegas, to be honest with you, I think Vegas stands a better chance of winning that series. However, if Martin Jones plays like he's capable of, he comes and is lights out. He's a big guy to begin with. He's tall. He covers the net very well, plays deep in the crease at times. He can make life miserable for Vegas who, for the most part, didn't score a lot of goals against LA, and they didn't need to. They will need to score some goals against San Jose.
They will. Yep.
And if they don't, San Jose won that one game against Anaheim 8-1. You remember that?
Yep.
Evander Kane, he's fit in very well for them. They can score some goals, and they're going to force Vegas to keep up with them. So this round is going to be much harder on them because they don't have the playoff experience as a team. They may as individual players, but it's the team aspect of it. So, I think Vegas can win this series, but if Martin Jones shows up, no.
Martin Jones gave up 4 goals in the 4 games total against Anaheim.
Played awesome.
Yep, played incredible. And then you got Evander Kane at the other end scoring goals for San Jose. You've got Brent Burns, who I guess reports are he's been kind of banged up a little bit, but they're still expecting him to play. So depending on how hurt or healthy he is, he'll be a major factor for San Jose in that game or that series. You've got the possible return of Joe Thornton. He skated warm-ups for a couple of those games in that first round series. And they're basically talking like he's day to day. They haven't come right out and said that. They're still saying there's no timetable for his return. But the way he's skating with the fifth line in practice. So he's practicing regularly, and he's taking warm up. Mm-hmm. He's not playing in the games, but he's taking warm up. They have come out and said he's definitely not going to play in game 1. But after that, they're not promising anything one way or the other. So they could end up having Joe Thornton come back during this series.
Yep.
Right now, it's looking more closer than ever. So, like you said, if Jones plays well, if the San Jose attack seems to play as well as they did in the first round, Vegas is a much tougher opponent than Anaheim was. So certainly not going to be easy. And on the Vegas side of things, the never give up attitude that those players have, San Jose may jump out to a 3-1 series lead in that one, but good luck getting that 4th win against Vegas.
Yeah.
Because they're just going to play desperate. They'll play desperate right from game 1. Right. I expect this series, whether it goes short, I don't expect it to be a sweep by any stretch, but whether it becomes is a 5, 6, or 7 game series, we're looking at a bunch of 1-goal games, I think.
Right. I agree with you. Wouldn't be surprised if San Jose wins this.
And I hope a couple of overtimes.
Wouldn't be surprised at all if San Jose wins this series. It would not surprise me at all. I mean, if we're going to pick our winners like we did with the East, that Winnipeg Nashville series is so hard to pick that one. But I guess if I'm looking at it, I would pick Winnipeg right now. I think they're playing the better hockey, and Patrick Laine he's just a great player. I mean, he could be the Hart. He could be up there in the voting for the Hart Trophy. He's just an awesome player, and I watched them score a hat trick against New York here the last month of the season when they were in Madison Square Garden, and he was just incredible player. So I think Winnipeg. I think Winnipeg is my pick for that series against Nashville.
I could see it going either way. I pretty much have to stay with Nashville because I picked them in my bracket on the bracket contest that NHL.com's having. Mm-hmm. I have Nashville beating Winnipeg in that one, but I'm so not confident about that pick at this point because I wouldn't be surprised if Winnipeg won that series at all. But I am going to stick with Nashville because I made that pick at the beginning, and I'm gonna stick with it. But that one could go either way. And I had, on the other side of things, I had San Jose and the Kings in this round, with San Jose losing to the Kings. So this one is wide open. I can pick anybody I want because I don't have either one of these teams going in my bracket. But I think Vegas is going to win this one. I really got a feeling. Yep.
I get the feeling that it all depends on Martin Jones. It really all depends on Martin Jones. If he shows up. I'm going with San Jose because Fleury and his times in Pittsburgh, 2 of the Stanley Cups really were Matt Murray. But he has, Fleury is he's great. He's a great goaltender, future Hall of Famer, but he's not lights out. And I've seen him in playoffs get beat pretty badly, actually, too.
Yep.
So I think it's San Jose's series because Vegas doesn't have the experience. I could be wrong on that. I think it'll be close? Yeah. I think Vegas will play them tough, and like you say, they'll play. It'll be a game. Every game will be a game of desperation for them. But if San Jose shows up, and of course they have the experience going all the way to Stanley Cup Finals, I think San Jose's series to lose.
All right. Well, we'll see. All right. That is pretty much it for our talking of all the series by series anyway. They have released the Stanley Cup second round playoff opening game schedule. They haven't released the full schedule of the second round yet, and they probably won't until after the Boston-Toronto game tonight. But the opening games of each series on Thursday, which is tomorrow night, Game 1 between Pittsburgh and Washington will be at 7 p.m., and Game 1 of San Jose and Vegas will be at 10 p.m. So NHL is finally getting smart, staggering these games so we don't have to try to watch two games at the same time. These will be back-to-back games tomorrow night, which is good. Friday, there'll just be one game on the docket, and that will be Winnipeg and Nashville, and that will be 8 p.m. Eastern for that game. And then Saturday will be the other series, the Tampa Bay versus Boston or Toronto. But the time of that game starting will determine on who wins the game tonight. So apparently, if Boston wins, NBC has priority, and they want that to be the 3 p.m. game on Saturday.
Yeah.
If Toronto wins, Hockey Night in Canada wants their priority, so that game will be at 8 p.m. on Saturday night. Yeah. So either way, that game 1 will be on Saturday. Just the time will not be known until after the Boston-Toronto game tonight. So those are your dates and times for the first game of each series. And then they'll release the rest of the round 2 schedule probably tonight after it's probably already written. They just haven't released it, and they won't release it until tonight after the Boston-Toronto game.
Right.
Because they got to know who's winning that series before they can set in stone. There's probably 2 schedules already written, one with Boston as the winner, one with Toronto as the winner, and they'll just immediately release whichever one applies after tonight's game.
Agreed.
So, all right, let's move on to some of the stories that have been going on around the league. And starting with transactions, we've had a few transactions, or a couple transactions. First and foremost, the Minnesota Wild fired Chuck Fletcher as executive vice president and general manager on Monday. Owner Craig Leopold told Fletcher his contract would not be renewed and said a search for a replacement will begin immediately. Brent Flair, the Wild's senior vice president of hockey operations, will be the acting GM. The Wild were eliminated by the Jets in 5 games in the Western Conference first round following a third-place finish in the Central Division. Leopold stated Fletcher's firing was not a direct result of the loss to the Jets, rather a reflection of Minnesota's poor history in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Fletcher became the second GM in Wild history when he was hired way back in 2009, replacing Doug Riesbro. He is the son of longtime NHL executive Cliff Fletcher and who's a member of the Hockey Hall of Fame. Minnesota has qualified for the playoffs each of the past 6 seasons, but has won 2 postseason series and lost 3 straight first-round series. The Wild are 4-16 in their past 20 playoff games. Leopold said Boudreau, who was hired by Fletcher to replace Mike Yeo as coach on May 7, 2016, will be consulted, but will not be part of the interview process. He also added, I'd say our coaching staff right now is not going anywhere. So the owner is obviously happy with the coaches. He's not happy with the GM.
Right.
And yeah, Minnesota's track record in the playoffs, they've done very well in the regular season in the last several years, but they just don't do anything in the playoffs.
Yep.
They've won 2 series, and I think they've been out either in the first or second round. I don't think they've gotten out of the second round yet as a franchise.
Agreed. Yep.
And the other transaction we had this week is about our local connection, Bill Peters. He was hired as coach of the Calgary Flames on Monday, just a couple days after he resigned from the Carolina Hurricanes. Peters, who resigned as coach of the Carolina Hurricanes on Friday, received a multi-year contract. He replaces Glenn Golson, who was fired on April 17th after the Flames missed the Stanley Cup playoffs for the 7th time in 9 seasons. The Flames were 37-35-10, 5th in the Pacific Division, and missed the playoffs by 11 points after qualifying last year. Calgary's home record of 17-20-4 was the 4th worst in the NHL, and its power play was tied for 28th. The Flames also scored an NHL low 61 third-period goals. Peters was the only person interviewed to replace Golson. At the time we made the decision for a change last week, I had gone and asked for permission to speak with Carolina regarding Bill's availability, and I wanted to thank the Carolina Hurricanes for their cooperation in that process. GM Brad Trelving said, "We're able to move forward with Bill." Peters and Trelving had worked together before. Peters coached Canada to the gold medal in the 2016 World Championship, with Trelving serving as co-GM. There are some great candidates out there, Trelving said. This wasn't one based on having or hiring a friend, per se. Bill and I don't have a long relationship. We had a situation where we worked together over a small period of time. But you do your homework. This is somebody I believe fully in. This is somebody I have been around enough to know. The network of people I talk to not formalize a thought, but solidify a thought I got. Peters had 1 year remaining on his contract before exercising his opt-out clause with Carolina. And the Hurricanes did not qualify in the 4 years that he was coach of that team. A couple of quotes from Peters. "You have to be hungrier," said Peters, who will coach Canada in the 2018 World Championship in Copenhagen, Denmark, from May 4th through 20th. That's no problem. I have no issue with that. We're going to set realistic expectations, and they're going to be high. Expectations are great to have. If you have high expectations, that means you're legitimate. You're in the hunt. You don't want to be in a situation where there are no expectations, there are no demands, because it means you aren't close enough. This group is right there. Peters, who's born in Three Hills, Alberta, 80 miles northeast of Calgary, was hired 6 days after Gultson was fired. And he said the decision to step down in Carolina was not one taken lightly. He had 1 year remaining on his contract and an opt-out clause he needed to exercise by Friday. It kept coming back to the fact that the new GM deserves the opportunity to hire his own coach. And especially when you combine it with the new owner and a new GM, I think they need to chart their own path. Really a great area with great people in the community, Peters said of his time in Carolina. I worked with a ton of great people. I'm thankful for the effort from the players in the 4 years, and I'm thankful for the fan support. They're very passionate fans. It's all positive memories for me. It really is. So yeah, I mean, basically, Peters took the opportunity to go home. It's basically what this comes down to.
He's an Alberta guy. They went after him. I'm sure they talked about it. I'm sure this wasn't something that just popped in the last week. The season's over. Let's go after Bill Peters. I have a feeling that they knew that they were interested and they explored it, and it worked out.
Yep.
And he had his good stretches during his time in Carolina, and he also had some lousy stretches.
Yep. Well, to be fair to him, too, he wasn't really given a great team on the ice to work with. I mean, he's got a bunch of good young prospects, but the team is still probably a good couple of years away from being able to contend for a championship. They're probably, depending on the moves they make this summer, they could be a team that could make the playoffs next fall or next spring, but they're probably one of those teams where if they do make the playoffs, it's one and done as far as their season goes. It's a rebuilding team there in Carolina, and Peters, I guess, didn't want to be part of another rebuild. And he's like you said, he's from Alberta. The job opened up in his home province, so he took the opportunity to go home. So. Peters goes back to Calgary. He clearly thinks that the team on the ice in Calgary is better than the team that he had in Carolina, even though the records were practically the same for this season. But I would agree on paper that Calgary is a better team than Carolina. They just underperformed this year.
I agree. I think Calgary is a playoff team. They just ran out of real estate there at the end of the season.
Injuries to Mike Smith didn't help them, and
just great timing for Bill Peters.
Yep.
And you look at the Carolina Hurricanes, I think that Tom Dundon's decision now to pick a head coach becomes, very, very important.
Yep.
I think he's just as the Rangers, I said a couple of weeks ago, and I guess it would be something you'd think that management would do every time, but it's very important. It's almost to the not only do you want to pick a coach who the players like and want to play for, you also need to pick a coach who the fans will like and want to go watch the Hurricanes play.
Absolutely.
And I think that's not always, it doesn't have to be that way in New York. It could be, they could pick a real controversial guy in New York. They could pick Patrick Roy. And he would make it in New York City.
Yep.
I mean, I really hope Jeff Gorton talks to him. That's the last. I'm going to throw that one out there.
I'm not sure Wall wants to get back into coaching, does he?
There's a city where he could do well. Okay, but I won't say. We're not talking about that. We'll go back to Carolina. I think. I just think that they have to pick a guy who has the charisma for the players on the ice, but also for the fans. And if they pick the right guy in Carolina, they have a team that's not far at all from the playoffs.
Yep.
So this is a pivotal decision. That's what I think. More so than it is in New York, although it's important in New York. And who's the other team without a coach right now? It's just escaping my mind. There's another team without a coach.
Dallas.
Yeah. They need to pick a coach who's gonna put fans in the seats. I really do. They got to pick a good coach.
Yeah, and in Carolina's case, I think what's slowing things down there is there are a lot of candidates for both GM and coach that are being scared off by Tom Dundon's hands-on approach. And Tom Dunn said in day one, when he was introduced as the owner of the team, that he was going to be hands-on until he got the team to a point where he was comfortable with the people that were running the organization, the people at the top, and then he was going to step away and let them do their job.
Yep.
There's a lot of scuttlebutt around the hockey world that Tom Dundon is meddling a little bit more than what some of these potential candidates feel comfortable with. And I think he's scared off. Dundon is scared off a few candidates as a result of that. So ultimately what Carolina has to do is they got to figure out, well, first of all, they got to find a GM. That's first and foremost for them. Then once that GM is in place, then they can focus on coach. But the biggest thing and I hope Dundon realizes this, the biggest thing that Carolina needs to do to get that organization to the next level as a total organization is they need to build out, they need to get better at scouting and player development and all the hard work stuff that goes on behind the scenes.
Right.
That hasn't been good enough because the team has been perpetually an outside the playoffs team for years. Even when they've had their few runs here and there, the 2002, of course, 2006, 2009, the years where they've gone on a run. It's a single year run and then it's done and then they're out the next season.
Right.
That tells me that the player development side of things down in the lower parts of the organization, the scouts and the all the player development people, not the coaching staff, not the GM, but the system that has been in place to develop a strong organization, to develop the farm system, all of that needs big improvement, and that's where they need to focus a lot of their time. You got to get a GM, you got to get a coach for the major league roster, but you've got to get that other stuff in place if you want to get good and stay good long term. There's a certain number of teams around the league that get it and they have that stuff in place, and those are the teams that are making the playoffs year after year after year. With every once in a while they're missing occasionally. So your Pittsburghs, your Detroits, you could make that case about Boston. You could make that case about the Rangers. Teams that are in the playoffs year after year after year after year with occasional miss here or there. They need to model those teams,
right,
and build an organization that does that. So they'll get that chance. They're basically wiping the slate clean here. GM's gone, coach is gone, and they'll have the opportunity to build everything back up from scratch. But it'll be a busy summer in Carolina for sure. And good luck to Bill Peters in his new job, which
Absolutely.
is what this whole story is all about.
Yep.
All right, that's all the transaction I saw, unless you saw any.
Nope, that covers it.
All right, let's go on to injuries, and we're just basically going to talk about a few teams that have been eliminated. And, of course, anytime a team gets eliminated, you always get a few injuries that pop out of the blue. Or that come out after the series is done because, there's no longer a threat to those players for this season anyway. And we'll start with Philly. Top line center Sean Couturier missed Game 4 because of a torn MCL in his right knee. He returned and scored a hat trick in Game 5 and had 5 points the hat trick came in Game 6. He had the game-winning goal in Game 5 and had 5 points, including the 3 goals in Game 6. Provorov played Game 6 despite an injury in his left shoulder that limited his effectiveness, and he'll need surgery on that. And So he was a key defenseman for them. So and he was matched against Sidney Crosby in that series. So and Michael Neuwirth, who also was battling injuries. So number of injuries for Philly. On Colorado, the Avalanche played without their number one goalie, Semyon Varlamov, the entire playoffs, and their best all-around defenseman in Erik Karlsson. Varlamov injured his knee against the Blackhawks on March 30th, 2 days after Johnston crashed into the boards against the Flyers and fractured his kneecap. They also lost Samuel Girard for 3 games due to a lower body injury. He did return for Game 5 and 6, but he probably wasn't 100% healthy. Goalie Jonathan Bernier ended up hurting himself in Game 4 of that series, which means they went to Andrew Hammond as the third goaltender to finish out that series. Colorado had a number of injuries. And then, of course, Minnesota, we talked about Ryan Suter and Zach Parise, both who out with major injuries, and those were probably 2 of their better players on that team. And Parise had a fractured sternum, so he was going to be out long-term anyway. And then Ryan Suter, I can't remember what his injury was.
He was hurt before the series started, though.
But he was out for the remainder of the playoffs, yes, no matter how far Minnesota went. Now, talking about Pittsburgh, Evgeny Malkin and Carl Hagelin didn't practice on Tuesday, and each is day-to-day, but it's already come out that Malkin will not play in Game 1. But Hagelin, they haven't said one way or another on whether he'll play or not. And as far as Columbus is concerned, Zach Werenski played most of the season for the Blue Jackets with an undisclosed injury. So basically he hurt himself way back on October 30th against the Boston Bruins and has been playing with the injury. They didn't say what the injury was.
No, they didn't.
But he basically admitted after that series was over that he was not 100%. Pretty much from way back in October all the way through the season. Yep. And
they also said they don't know whether the injury needs surgery. I remember reading that in the article as well.
Yep. So, and he's obviously a major piece of the Columbus Blue Jackets. And then we've talked about Joe Thornton as possibly coming back. Who knows? He's getting close anyway. Defenseman Brent Burns, missing his second consecutive practice this week. But he will likely play in that game. But there's a question there of how healthy he is. And then finally, Andrei Burakovsky of the Capitals didn't play after Game 2 of their series against the Blue Jackets because of an upper body injury. And he also needed minor surgery. Trotz said it's possible for the 23-year-old forward would be able to return later in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Kind of at the time made it sound, this is going way back to Game 2, kind of made it at the time sound like that Burakovsky would be back basically for Game 1 of the second round, but there hasn't really been an update on Burakovsky that I'm aware of. But this is his second major injury of the year. He missed 19 games back in the early part of the season from October 26th to December 6th after fracturing his left thumb. So
you covered it well, Wayne.
Yep, that's all the injury updates I have. Of course, who isn't hurt? There's a lot of rumors flying around that Bergeron is also not 100% healthy either. But yet he's playing. He missed one game already in this series, but he'll be there. He'll be out there tonight for sure. All right. As far as other interesting stories going on around the league, Rod Brind'Amour has come up as a potential name as being someone who may be an option for head coach of the Carolina Hurricanes. He said he's interested in becoming the next coach. The quotes, though, coming from him don't give me a whole lot of confidence on how successful he'll be. He basically says, if you never try, you'll never know. Brind'Amour, who's a former captain of the current and a current assistant for the Hurricanes. The reason for saying why not, he said, I've been doing it for 8 years. I really believe I can help out one way or the other and see if I can put us over the hump. I don't think as an assistant I'm going to get any better or learn any more. So now's the time. If they're going to find the best guy to do it, and if it's me, that's great. If not, I understand. But I feel like I could at least step up and see if it could happen. The Hurricanes have a coaching vacancy after Bill Peters resigned on Friday. So the thing that concerns me about these quotes is like, I'll give it a try. Why not? He should be saying, yeah, I could do it, without any hesitation. It's not a let's see what I can do, or we'll give it a try. We'll give it our best effort. Well, that's not what the Hurricanes want. They want a guy who's confident and knows that he is in fact going to take this team back.
Right.
So that's kind of what concerned me with these quotes from him. But yeah, the story, goes on. the history of this is all documented. Brendan Moore obviously has been an assistant coach for the team for years. The team hasn't made the playoffs. Peters is gone. The GM is gone. New owner. We've talked about this ad nauseum, but it'll be interesting to see whether or not they decide to give Brendan Moore that shot at being the head coach. He's probably the option if they can't find someone better, I guess. Is probably the best way to put it.
One thing's for sure, people in this area know him very well. He's a good following.
Well, here's the thing about Brendan Moore, and if you don't know much about him, he is legendary for his work ethic, particularly when it comes to working out. The guy still looks like he could step out there and play. Yeah. He's in great shape still. A lot of players, when they retire, you start putting on the pounds almost immediately. By a year or two out, they've gained 30, 40 pounds. Brendan Moore is still just as fit as can be. He's still in great shape. So his work ethic in that sense is second to none. So if nothing else, if they did go with him, he will give it his best shot. He will do everything in his power to bring this team over the top. So, and for all we know, he could be a great coach.
Oh yeah. You never know.
He could be the next Scotty Bowman. We don't know because he hasn't been given the shot yet at being a head coach anywhere. Because as soon as he retired, he was made an assistant coach of the Canes, and he's never left. He stayed right in this area. His son, he's got one son anyway that's about to be drafted, has been playing in the Carolina Junior Hurricanes organization for years. So it'll be interesting to see if they do give him that shot. All right, and then finally, David Quinn was named coach of the United States for the 2019 IIHF World Junior Championship. The announcement was made on Friday in conjunction with USA Hockey and the NHL Network. The 2019 World Junior Championship is going to take place in Canada this coming year, December 26th through January 5th in Vancouver and Victoria, British Columbia. Quinn is the current coach of the Boston University Terriers. He's been there for the past 5 years. And he'll be overseeing approximately 40 players at the 2018 World Junior Summer Showcase this summer at USA Hockey Arena in Plymouth, Michigan in August. The U.S. will be joined by Canada, Finland, and Sweden in that short little showcase event. He's 105, 68, and 21 at BU. He's coached the Terriers to 4 straight NCAA tournament appearances, which is pretty good accomplishment considering only about a third of NCAA teams make it to that tournament. And he has 2 Hockey East tournament championships already and the 2015 Beanpot title. Mm-hmm. He was named Hockey East and New England Coach of the Year back in 2015. And a number of players have already played for him that are in NHL ranks. Bruins defenseman Charlie McAvoy, Buffalo Sabres forward Jack Eichel, Arizona Coyotes forward Clayton Keller, and Minnesota Wild forward Jordan Greenway. 4 players from BU were selected in the first round of the 2016 NHL draft: Kelleher, McAvoy, defenseman Dante Fabro, and forward Kiefer Bellows. BU left wing Brady Tkachuk is number 2 in the NHL Central Scouting finalists of North American skaters eligible for the 2018 NHL draft this June 22nd. So he'll be among the first 5 players chosen in that draft. So, not saying all these players are great because of him, but he's been a coach for all these guys somewhere along the way. Okay. All right, we're on to honors and milestones, and I've got basically just a bunch of announcements that have happened over the past. Basically, they're doing one of these a day. Each NHL award, they're announcing the nominees each day, or the finalists each day. So, quickly go down through these. Vegas Golden Knights defenseman Derek Englund, Philadelphia Flyers right wing Wayne Simmons, and Winnipeg Jets right wing Blake Wheeler were named the finalists for the Mark Messier NHL Leadership Award. Of course, Mark Messier himself determines the finalists and the winner of this award. Yeah. So, and of course, he judges who wins based on, it's a leadership quality award. Matt Barzal of the Islanders, Brock Besser of the Canucks, and Clayton Keller are the Calder Trophy finalists. That's the Best Rookie Award. Yep. Can't disagree with any of those choices there.
Nope.
Brian Boyle, Roberto Luongo, and Jordan Stahl were named Saturday as the 3 finalists for the Bill Masterton Memorial Trophy. And that award is presented annually to the player who best exemplifies the qualities of perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to hockey. So, of course, it's well documented, the Brian Boyle situation where he's coming back from cancer.
Odds-on favorite to win it, would you say, Wayne?
Oh, probably. Although the other 2 finalists are definitely worthy. Roberto Luongo basically got nominated not only for overcoming his hand and groin injuries, but for the speech that he did back shortly after the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting, they did a little ceremony before their next home game after that happened. And he basically came out, grabbed the mic, and spoke in an unscripted, heartfelt speech to the fans of Florida in that one. So, which is highly unusual for a player to do. That went over really, really well with everybody involved. And then, of course, Jordan Stahl lost his daughter, who was delivered stillborn due to a terminal birth defect. And he came back from that after only missing 3 games. So, yeah, all 3 worthy candidates, but I think our winner is going to be Brian Boyle. I'd have to agree. Alexander Barkov, William Karlsson, and Ryan O'Reilly were named finalists for the Lady Byng Memorial Trophy on Friday. This award is given annually to the player voted to best combined sportsmanship, gentlemanly conduct, and ability. Barkov had 78 points, but only had 7 minor penalties all year, no majors. Karlsson had 43 goals this year with the Vegas Golden Knights, and he led the league with a plus 49, and he only had 12 penalty minutes, so 6 minors. But this last one's probably most impressive to me anyway. Ryan O'Reilly had 61 points and won 1,274 faceoffs, the most by any player since the NHL began tracking the stat in 97-98. O'Reilly is regarded as being the best faceoff guy in the league, even better than Bergeron. And he went through the entire season doing all that by just getting 1 minor penalty all year.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Yeah, I think he's going to win it.
So, and then finally this week, and this one was announced right after we finished podcasting last week, Victor Hedman, PK Subban, and Drew Doughty are your Norris Trophy candidates. And, of course, Norris Trophy is the award going to Best Defenseman. So, with all these awards being announced, we're creeping up on the major ones here at this point. So, you still got the Hart Trophy that hasn't been put out yet. I'm trying to think of the others that haven't been announced. That may be the only one left.
Yeah. They got the Jack Adams that's out.
Yep.
Incidentally, who do you think is going to win the Norris Trophy, Wayne?
I think this is Hedman's year.
I think they're going to give it to him. Yeah. I really do. I think Victor Hedman's going to win it this year.
Yep, he's had a great season. And I would probably put Drew Doughty as the second runner-up on that one. All right, so that's it for news stories around the league, unless you have any you want to add to it.
No, that's very good, Wayne. I think you.
All right, so we're on to the power ranking already.
Yes. And you know what, Wayne? It's my turn this week.
It is.
On the power rankings. Did this one a little differently than normal. There's no reason to have an honorable mention because the season ended on April 11th, so there is no team on the outside looking in. You have your 16 playoff teams, and this might be the last time where we have 16 teams. From now on, there will only be 8. So, without any further ado, here is my 16-1. Number 16, the Anaheim Ducks. Number 15, the Los Angeles Kings. Number 14, the New Jersey Devils, and they're very lucky to get 14. Mm-hmm. Number 13, the Minnesota Wild. Number 12, the Philadelphia Flyers. Number 11, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Number 10, the Colorado Avalanche. They had a great playoffs. Number 9, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Number 8, the Boston Bruins. The only reason I have those 2 teams put right there at 9 and 8 is because it's a 7-game series.
Yep.
It's the only reason.
Yep.
Number 7, the Washington Capitals. Number 6, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Number 5, the Nashville Predators. Number 4, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Number 3, the Winnipeg Jets. Number 2, the San Jose Sharks. And the only reason I put them up so high is they swept.
That's right.
The Anaheim Ducks.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Number 1, the Vegas Golden Knights. And that is my power rankings for the podcast number 34.
I can't say I disagree, with Boston for sure being 8 because 1 through 7, those teams have already finished their playoff series and are waiting to play round 2.
Right.
And of course, everybody below Boston is either eliminated or, Toronto is the other one. And to me, it's obviously a coin flip between Boston and Toronto. Obviously, tonight's game will determine who ultimately is number 8. And who ultimately is number 9. In fact, the winner of that game tonight may jump up a few spots.
Are you right?
Depending on who it is. But yeah, I don't have a disagreement with any of that. That's for sure. All right. That's all we have for NHL this week. So let's get into the minor league stuff. And you want to talk a little KHL. I want to give an update on the Under-18 Worlds and the American Hockey League playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't I get the Under-18s out of the way and the American League out of the way, and then we'll talk Gagarin Cup.
Okay.
Because that one has actually finished their season, so we'll let you finish that one. And in the under-18s are already on to the playoffs. The regular season the round robin basically finished, and I got to try to pull it up here. Where is it? Oh, I put it away. Basically, there were 10 teams involved in the tournament. You had USA, Finland, Russia, Sweden, Canada, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Switzerland, Belarus, and France. And the teams that have moved on to the quarterfinals are... here we go. Standings, preliminary round. I'm going to pull them up. All right. The top 4 teams in Group A were Canada with a 4-0 record, although one of them was in overtime, so they didn't get the full 3 points in one of their games. Sweden with a 3-0-1. USA was 2-2, and Belarus was 1-3. They advance. Switzerland is out of Pool A and will play in the relegation round. And they went 0-4. In Group B, Finland won the pool with a 4-0 record, perfect 4 regulation wins, followed by Russia, who ends up 3-1. They had 2 regulation wins, 1 overtime win, so 3-1 for Russia. Slovakia ends up with 2-1. I'm sorry. Czech Republic took the 4th spot with a 1-3. Round robin record, and then France was the last place team in that pool, and they will play Switzerland in the relegation round. France finished with an 0-4 record, and they only scored 4 goals the entire tournament in 4 games. They gave up 30. So yeah, France pretty much got beat up pretty good in that series. So in the playoff round, you have let's see, home. All right, Finland is taking on Belarus, and the winner of that game, it's not a series, they play single game elimination in international stuff. The winner of the Finland-Belarus game will play Sweden and Slovakia, the winner of that one. And then, of course, the winners there go on to the gold medal game. Russia will play USA. It seems like those 2 teams always end up playing each other in these tournaments.
Yeah.
Russia will play USA, which is unfortunate for the Americans because this whole tournament is being played in Russia. So Russia's playing a home game. No matter what their seed is, they're playing a home game in every game in this tournament. So Russia plays USA, and then in the other half of the bracket, Canada plays Czech Republic. So the 2 winners there will play each other. And Canada has been rolling over everybody, so I expect Canada to beat the Czechs. Russia, USA could go either way. USA technically has the better team of the 2, but with Russia playing a home game, that home ice advantage will be a factor on whether or not the Americans can beat Russia. And that game is actually being televised on NHL Network tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. or Friday morning, 10:30 a.m. If you haven't listened to this podcast yet, or have, and it's still not past that time, you can watch that game on NHL Network in the U.S. And then I would expect Sweden to beat Slovakia and Finland to beat Belarus. So it's setting up for a possibility of Sweden, Finland, and USA, Canada, which would be a fun Final Four.
Yeah, it will be.
So that is my update on the U18. Now, moving on to the American League. They are now in their playoffs. And we have first round going underway in the American Hockey League playoffs. And, of course, in the American League, the first round is a 5-game series, not 7, which I believe they play a 2-2-1 format.
Yes.
Which is 2 games in one city, 2 games in the other city. And then if there's a 5th game necessary, they go back to the city that opened the series up. So right now in round 1, Lehigh Valley is playing Providence, and that series is tied 1-1. Wilkes-Barre Scranton, which is the Penguins affiliate, is playing the Charlotte Checkers, who's the Hurricanes affiliate, and that series right now is 2-0 Checkers, and they're headed to Wilkes-Barre for games 3 and 4. Lehigh Valley, of course, is the Philadelphia Flyers, I believe, against the Boston Bruins, which is or Providence Bruins, which is the Boston Bruins affiliate. And that one is heading to Lehigh Valley, tied at 1. Toronto Marlies, who is the Maple Leafs affiliate, is playing the Utica Comets, which is the Vancouver Canucks. And that series right now is 2-0 Marlies, and they're going to Toronto. So Utica's in trouble in that one.
Yep. And the Marlies are one of the best teams in the AHL.
Yep.
If not the best team.
Yep, they are. How did they end up with playing on the road in that series? They just didn't do well enough in the regular season, I guess. And then in the final series in the East, the Syracuse Crunch, who's the Tampa Bay affiliate, is playing the Rochester Americans, who, is they still the Rangers?
No, the Rochester Americans are the Buffalo Sabres.
That's right, the Buffalo Sabres. They used to be the Rangers. And that series is at 2-0 for Syracuse, and the series is heading to Syracuse for the next two games. So Rochester is definitely in big trouble in that series. Heading out west, you have the Chicago Wolves playing the Rockford Ice Hogs, and Rockford has a 2-0 series lead in that one, as that series is headed out to Chicago. The Grand Rapids Griffins and the Manitoba Moose are tied at a game apiece, with the series heading out to Grand Rapids. The Tucson Roadrunners are also tied 1-1 in their series with the San Jose Barracuda, and that series is headed to Tucson for the next two games. And then the only series in the American Hockey League that's actually complete, the Texas Stars beat the Ontario Reign 3-1 in that series. That series is over.
Very good.
So it's funny how that series has already played 4 games, where every other series has played just 2.
Right, that is funny. I would have thought, I could see him playing a third game, but I guess they got started earlier.
Yep. So yeah, that series is done, and basically Texas is sitting in waiting. And of course, the American Hockey League teams that make the playoffs get a little bit of a boost from their National Hockey League team if that National Hockey League team is eliminated. Because the first thing they do, and I know the Charlotte Checkers did it because I saw the transactions, soon as the Carolina Hurricanes season ended, they sent 2 or 3 players down. Players that are still young enough to be able to pass through waivers without, or be sent down without having to go through waivers.
Mm-hmm.
Those players are being sent down to their respective American League teams. So some of these teams, even though they may have had a better regular season or a worse regular season, are getting a boost from their NHL team by getting a couple of prospects that were up in the NHL at the time that the season ended. So that always happens in the American League. So American League is always unpredictable. So there's your American Hockey League update. All right, let's move on to the KHL.
Very good, Wayne. The KHL, as you know, they were in the Gagarin Cup playoffs last week. That ended on Sunday night. And I actually saw a picture of Justin Acevedo. We talked about him earlier on this podcast. He is the star for Akbars, drinking from the Gagarin Cup. I don't know whether it was champagne or beer or whatever it was, but that's a whole different thing than the Stanley Cup, which has that small bowl at the top.
Yep.
The Gagarin Cup is that. I mean, it's all cup, and they had that thing filled up, man. He was having a good time.
Yep.
But anyways, I wanted to this article is taken right off the KHL website, and it is entitled "A Great Show, Akbars Wins." The 10th anniversary season of the Continental Hockey League reached its climax on Sunday in Kazan, where Akbars won its 4th and decisive victory in the final series, thus clinching a 4-1 win over CSKA Moscow, and becoming a 3-time winner, the first 3-time winner of the Gagarin Cup, an achievement unmatched in the KHL. After the Hooters signaled the end of the game, KHL President Dmitry Chernyshenko shared his thoughts on the league's Jubilee season and congratulated the Kazan club on its victory. We had a wonderful final, and it is fitting that we had sent a puck and a replica of the trophy on a journey into space. This was a fascinating, action-packed season, which included our first ever open-air games in Helsinki and Riga, 2 epic 7-game match series in the Gagarin Cup playoffs, and some unexpected names qualifying for the knockout stage. There were many new breakthroughs and many brilliant moments that will linger long in the memory. The final turned out to be another surprise, considering so few correctly predicted the eventual winner. Nevertheless, this is why we love our great game so much, for its unpredictable nature, even though the best team always wins in the end. As a result, the spectators, viewers, and all the fans can be considered winners too, as it is they who benefit greatly from the drama. Of course, it is surprising to some that after 8 years, the trophy has returned to Tatarstan. The whole republic is now rejoicing, and no wonder, becoming the only club in the league to have won 3 Gagarin Cups is cause for great celebration. Akbars fully deserve this moment of glory, and we should also thank and praise the fans in Kazan. If only every hockey game at every arena had so many parents and children with such a passion for the game. They created just the kind of special atmosphere we need, and we congratulate every one of them. Of course, from a commercial and marketing standpoint, we would have been happier if the final series had continued so that we could all enjoy the full 7 games. However, here in Tatarstan, everyone was cheering for a swift victory. The opponent in the final, CSKA, is the club whose players provided the backbone of our heroic gold medal winning roster at the 2018 Winter Olympics, and they made a great contribution to the prestige of our country. CSKA tried its hardest to win, and the players battled courageously. You can see how much respect the opponent has earned from these wonderful fans here at the stadium. Being a gracious winner is also something to be extremely proud of, and it sets a fine example to others. Once again, many thanks to Kazan. The next season will be an interesting one, as we are entering an era of facing new realities. We will have financial fair play. 3 clubs are currently undergoing a financial audit, and we will be gradually lowering the wages cap. This will lead to a more even distribution of star players among the clubs and throughout the league. It will raise the level of competition and attract more youngsters. You will see this come true, and I hope you remember my words. The game will become even more exciting. So from the president of the KHL, I think you can see that they tried to play up the fact that it was a surprising outcome.
Yeah, it certainly was.
I don't think people would have picked Akbars to win, although they have had great success in the KHL. And, you know, if you're going to pick your top 5 teams that have the potential of winning, you'd have to put them in it. But that was a surprising win this year. It really was. I didn't give them a chance.
Yeah, because
we thought the West would win.
We had seen all kinds of reports that, you know, SKA and CSKA with their inflated payrolls, where those 2 teams were essentially the only 2 teams allowed to go past the salary cap that they have instituted there. And, you know, both those teams were loaded with players.
Yep.
We expected, you know, first we expected SKA to win, and then when they played each other, and CSKA ends up winning the series in that one, and then we just naturally figured that CSKA would go on and win the Gagarin Cup, and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, neither one of them did. So
neither one. I know.
That's refreshing, actually, to see that.
That is.
Because it just goes to show that you can tip the tables any way you want and give everybody the advantage that you want, but when it comes right down to it, you still got to play the games on the ice.
That's right. That's right, Wayne.
Good deal.
So that's another season of the KHL behind us, and congratulations to Akbars.
All right. So that leaves us with our picks of the week. And I actually couldn't really come up with one. The best thing that I came up with was the Jimmy Fallon. I don't know if you saw it, Jimmy Fallon this week. And I thought about it. I'm like, man, it's not really good for an audio podcast, but I'll leave a link in the show notes to it. Jimmy Fallon does his superlatives each week. And the funniest one that I saw was 2 of them that really were funny to me. One was about Brent Burns, and of course they show a picture of the player. They're essentially the shot that is, you know, their official press shot. And of course Brent Burns, they show his, you know, his beard, you know, his man bun, and then, you know, the toothless smile. And he was voted most likely to bankrupt the Tooth Fairy in that one. And then another one that jumped out at me was the one at the very end of that. Because they listed a whole bunch of players, and each player was most likely to something, right? And the other one that jumped out at me was, of course, they had to get Phil Kessel in because everybody loves making fun of Phil Kessel. Phil Kessel was most likely to be the offspring of Ed Sheeran and Bobcat Goldthwait. So those of you who don't know who Bobcat Goldthwait is, if you know what he looks like, yeah, I can see it. Ed Sheeran and Bobcat Goldthwait had a kid, it would look just like Phil Kessel. So that was the best thing I could come up with for pick of the week, for me anyway. But it's hard to do that on an audio podcast because you really got to see the pictures to get the jokes on that stuff.
That's good, though.
Yep. What was yours?
I'm trying to wrap my mind around Bobcat Goldthwait. He does have a likeness. I'll give you that.
Yep.
To Phil Kessel. Listen, my pick of the week, Wayne, I actually picked it early on in the week. I went through, as a Rangers fan, I went through a lot of wonderful post-game meetings that John Tortorella had with the press, and memorable press conferences they were.
Certainly memorable.
Tortorella has had a lot of really good ones. I can remember him really putting Joe Thornton in his place on one of them. And I can remember him having several arguments with Larry Brooks of the New York Post. But this week, he had another great press conference. And if you watched it at all, it was after Game 5 of the Columbus Blue Jackets Washington Capitals series, where he basically stared down the press. You could tell he was upset. He was very, very upset with the loss that they had just experienced, the third in a row. And I think he was a determined guy when he walked up to the podium and he just challenged the press. I think if you had asked him a simple, fair, balanced question, I don't think that was a night where he was going to answer anything really very well. But if you get a chance, go on NHL.com, pull up this article by Tom Giolitti of the NHL.com entitled Tortorella Guarantees Blue Jackets Will Force Game 7 Against the Capitals. Columbus coach predicts win at home after third straight loss. Columbus Blue Jackets coach John Tortorella guaranteed they will force Game 7 against the Washington Capitals in the Eastern Conference first round after a 4-3 overtime loss in Game 5 on Saturday. Nicholas Backstrom's goal at 11:53 of overtime gave the Capitals their third straight win and a 3-2 lead in the best-of-7 series. Game 6 is at Columbus on Monday. Game 7 would be at Washington on Wednesday. We'll be back here for Game 7, Tortorella said. After tying the game at 3-3 on Oliver Bjorkstrand's deflection goal 2 minutes and 30 seconds into the third period, the Blue Jackets had the Capitals on their heels, outshooting them 16-1 in the third period. That one deflection, the only shot they had on goal was a goal.
Yep.
But couldn't put another shot past Braden Holtby. The Capitals won in overtime when Backstrom redirected Dmitry Orlov's shot from the point. It would be understandable if the Blue Jackets were disheartened after such a loss. Their season is on the brink after winning the first 2 games of the series in Washington in overtime. They lost Game 3 and Game 5 in overtime. But Tortorella said he's not concerned about the players bouncing back. I won't have to say a damn word to them, Tortorella said. We'll be back here for Game 7. And this was to a Washington press corps. You got to see it. It really was a very good press conference. Capitals captain Alex Ovechkin made a similar prediction after Washington lost 5-4 in overtime in Game 2, saying they would win Game 3 and Game 4 at Columbus and return home for Game 5 with the series tied 2-2, which the Capitals did. So Alex Ovechkin pulls off the Mark Messier and wins 2 games. Tortorella didn't. Now it's the Blue Jackets' turn to back up Tortorella's words. Well, what else are you going to say, Capitals coach Barry Trotz said. That's good. He wants to get it out there that he believes in his team, just as I believe in my team. So it's our job for that not to happen, and we're going to try to do that. Our backs are against the wall, right? Blue Jackets captain Nick Foligno said. If you can't play your best game come Monday, then that's disappointing. And they didn't play their best game, not even close. I don't have any worries about our group at all going into Monday. If we have the same effort, the same mentality that we did tonight, we should be just fine. So there you have it. That series ended on Monday. Of course, if it didn't, we'd be looking at Game 7 here tonight. And John Tortorella's prophecy would have come true, but it did not come true. In fact, they really fell short.
Yep.
So there you have it. Predictions.
So we got all kinds of guarantees going on around the league. You had Ovechkin with his. You got Tortorella with his. Tuukka Rask made one coming out of Game 5 because he stunk up the joint in Game 5. That was the game he got pulled. And he came, he said he didn't come out and actually, distinctly guarantee that he would the Bruins would win Game 6, but he pretty much said, I'll be better. We'll go into Toronto and close them out. He just kind of offhand threw it out there, but of course, the press, especially the Boston press, they took that comment and ran with it and called it a guarantee. So he didn't come right out and say, we will win. And he says, I'll be better in Game 6. We'll go in there and close them out.
Yeah.
So he just kind of made that offhand comment that basically the press turned into a big guarantee. Oh my God. So
yeah.
So Tuukka ended up being wrong on that one because Toronto ended up, although Tuukka played better, he played a lot better in Game 6 than he did in Game 5, and he played well enough for the Bruins to win. They just couldn't beat Anderson in Game 6. They had all kinds of chances. They just couldn't bury the puck. So we'll see tonight whether Tuukka not ultimately gets his wish in closing out the Toronto Maple Leafs. Tuukka will have to be sharp.
I think he will be.
And the Bruins will have to come out gunning, but anyway, we're getting close to that game. We're now 90 minutes away from the start of that game, so we will go ahead and wrap things up here, and we'll catch you in another week or so, sometime Wednesday, Thursday of next week, somewhere in that neighborhood, and we'll take things from there. By then, we will have 2 to 3 games under our belt in the second round done, and we'll wrap up this Boston-Toronto Game 7 to lead off next week's show, and then we'll go from there.
Yes, sir. Sounds good, Wayne.
So let's go ahead and finish this until next week. We'll catch you later, Steve.
Have a good week, Wayne, and best of wishes, best luck to you and your Bruins.
Yeah, I'll be on the edge of my seat for sure tonight. All right. Have a good night. Well, there you have it. If you like the show, please show us your support by subscribing to it using your favorite podcatcher program or app. The Hockey Nuts podcast can be found on major podcast search engines like Apple Podcasts and Google Play Music. Just search for the term The Hockey Nuts in whatever app you use to get podcasts. We can also be found at thehockeywriters.com on their podcast page. Thehockeywriters.com is a great place to get more stories and content about our favorite sport. We love listener involvement, and there are a few ways you can get involved with the show. You can email the show at feedback@thehockeynuts.com, or you can leave us a voicemail in our mailbox at 919-960-1718. You can also tweet us. I'm at WayneHalley9. Steve is at SBall504man. Also, be sure to visit our website at thehockeynuts.com. There you can see all of our past episodes archived, and you can listen to the show through your web browser on that site. As always, links and stories that we mention in the show are available in the show notes for this episode. In addition to our website, you can also watch us record the show each week live on YouTube. We generally record on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday nights, depending on our work schedules. You can find our YouTube channel at thehockeynuts.com/YouTube. The show is a labor of love for us, but the production of it is not free. To help us offset the cost of producing the show, we've set up various affiliate links on our webpage at thehockeynuts.com. Affiliate links allow you to help us financially support our podcast without costing you any more money out of pocket. Some of the affiliate relationships we have are with Amazon, HockeyMonkey.com, Ting.com, and SeatGeek.com. If you use any of these services, we'd greatly appreciate it if you used our affiliate link to those sites. Simply go to thehockeynuts.com and click on the appropriate advertising banner on the right. Your purchase will not cost you anything extra, and a small portion of your purchase will come back to help support the show. Finally, we're also looking for future guests for the show. Obviously, we're not experts on every team and league in hockey, so if you consider yourself more knowledgeable than us on a particular team or league, we definitely want to hear from you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Hockey Nuts Podcast, and have a great rest of your day.